everyone. I know we're getting to the end of the day and people are probably a little wiped out on talks, so thank you for still being here. So as Rob said, I'd like to talk for the next 30 minutes about product positioning. Essentially, how are you describing what your product does in comparison to what else is on the market, what the other options are out there? So I thought Encore's talk earlier was really interesting and relevant here because he talked about the fact that you can get to a certain point in your business, strong-arming, and I would say you can get initial traction and that first 20, 30K MRR with okay product positioning, but you do reach a point at which you've got to be really thoughtful about how you describe your product versus the competition, especially if you want to hit those higher growth numbers, which is why I'm giving this talk at Growth specifically. What's really funny is I've done this process with a number of SaaS companies. Normally, they already have a decent number of customers. I'm currently working on a SaaS company. I do not have customers yet because we're about to onboard our first couple folks. So I can't even do this for my own business right now, which is really embarrassing because I hate my own positioning. But this is really useful if you do have a customer base that you can learn from. So I would actually like to start this talk with a question to you. Over the lifetime of your business, have you ever described your product in any of the ways that are shown on this next slide? Have you ever put this on your homepage, maybe on a landing page or on an ad? And by the way, I think these are all good attributes for a product to have, something that will save your customers time or maybe money. And I myself am working on, the product I'm working on is meant to save our users time. But has anyone ever used terms like this to describe what their product does? Okay, I'm seeing a couple of hands. So some of us are in the same boat here. And again, this isn't a trick. I think these are really important things for products to do. And lots of us use these phrases, but the problem comes in when these are what you rely on day in and day out to try to differentiate yourself from what else your customers could be using. I thought this slide was funny. I was going to talk about how you're losing money, but I kind of did that on the last slide so we can speed through. And the thing is, I'm sure your customers actually do want to be saving time. Maybe they do want to be saving money. And I know if they're looking for software to solve whatever problem it is that they're dealing with, they do want something that is easy to use and also really powerful. But I'll show you a little experiment that I ran to kind of show you why your positioning needs to get more specific than those phrases. So while I was preparing this talk, I went to Capterra and I searched for appointment scheduling software, which is really relevant because we just talked about appointment scheduling software. So I believe someone else yesterday used a Capterra review as well, or a mention of Capterra, but if you're not familiar, it's a review site, right? So it aggregates products and I, as a prospect, can decide which one's gonna be best for me. So I wanted to see how these different appointment scheduling tools were describing themselves in this lineup, right? When someone like me as a prospect is coming to a review site and I'm forced to choose between 4, 5, 6, 7 different options. It's a lot of information. I have a very low attention span because I'm probably busy. I have other stuff to do during the day. So these guys are going to have to work really hard to help me understand why it's worth going to their website, signing up for a trial of their product. As it turns out, a lot of them really weren't working that hard. They were all saying the same thing. So apart from 1 or 2 scheduling tools that did have really strong copy, and it seems like they hired a professional copywriter, most of them sold me on the same things. They said that they were a powerful system that had a robust feature set that I could take advantage of. Of course, I was going to save time. Of course, it was going to be easy to use. And there are 2 big problems with this. So one, as a prospect, it's really hard for me to understand what these things will look like in my life. They're very abstract phrases. So using words like this to describe how your product helps people, it'd be kind of like coming up to me in the grocery store and being like, hey, you need to buy this flour and these eggs and this milk and this butter. And I'd be like, why? A, I don't know you. B, why are you trying to sell me these random grocery items? None of these are on my list. I don't know where you're going with this. But if you came up to me and you said, hey, you need to buy all these things and then take them home and combine them, because when you do, you'll get this. Well, now I know how my life is better, right? Because there's a cake in my life. So I can picture this, right? And the first problem, again, with phrases like robust feature set is that you're kind of focusing on the ingredients and you're not really focusing on the cake. You're not focusing on the problem that's being solved. So the second issue is that when you use phrases like save time and save money solely when describing your product, and by the way, a number of us raised our hands and said, yes, okay, we've done that, myself included. You make yourself indistinct, right? You sound like just not only do you sound like your competitors, you also sound like all kinds of other products that are in entirely different niches. So prospects have no way of knowing how you are any better than any solution that they could be trying. To stand out from the crowd and really capture people when they're in that shopping mindset, you've got to get a lot more specific, and you have to speak to this pain that they're feeling and the better life that they envision for themselves once they have a solution in place. By the way, this is 10 times more important if you're in a crowded market, right? If your product was on Capterra and you have 20 competitors that someone could pick from, this gets even more important. And it's also very important if your prospect's cost of switching to you is really high. And I mean that in terms of the time involved, the data migration involved. And we'll look at an example, a real software example, to kind of bring this to life. And by the way, for the rest of the talk, what this is going to look like, what you can expect is concept, example, and then I'm going to get super tactical at the end. But don't worry about trying to take notes and keep up. I've got everything, including the slide deck and a checklist and all kind of stuff, all those kinds of things available at the end. So you can sit back and just watch and not stress out. So my husband, Steven, and I use a software called YNAB, or You Need a Budget, to manage our personal finances. And I also use YNAB to manage my business finances. We've been using it for about 3 years, and by now, I'm a pretty hardcore user. There's a lot I really love about YNAB. By the way, I know a lot of folks here have been to many MicroConfs. Was anyone here the year Jesse, the founder of YNAB, spoke? Okay, great. It was a good talk. I enjoyed it. I think the story behind how the product came to be is wonderful. And the reason that we started using YNAB is that previously we had been using a spreadsheet to manage our budget. And I'm an okay spreadsheet user, but I'm not a power user. And we would set up our budget in our spreadsheet. And so we'd have, okay, here's the amount of money that we're going to be able to live on next month, and all the different categories that we spend in. And then we would manually look at all of our spending from our bank accounts and our credit cards, and we would have to figure out, okay, how much money do I have left in every category? If you have ever done this, then you would know how much room for human error there is in that process. It's horrible. And what's great about YNAB is that I can do that same process in my spreadsheet that I was doing in a spreadsheet where I've got all my categories, but it automatically imports all of my bank and my credit card transactions, and it removes that room for human error. So I used to really stress out about whether we were accidentally stealing from ourselves in the future, whether we were accidentally spending more money than we had without realizing it. And YNAB eliminated that stress for us, and that was great, until it wasn't. And this is where we get really deep into the weeds on my boring finance details. So the old version of YNAB used to let you manage your debt or your overspend in 2 ways. And I've made a little example here, and you can see that this random category, let's say I set aside $100 to buy new shoes, and I spent $125. So YNAB would let you cover that in 2 ways. You could either pull surplus from another category to cover your spending and get yourself back into the black, or you could push that debt into the following month, and you could budget $25 in the following month to get yourself into the black. Now, we needed this ability because my husband, who's full-time salaried, actually also in software, he makes a lot of work purchases on his credit card, and then at the end of the quarter, he submits an expense report, and we get reimbursed a couple $1,000 This is especially true when he takes trips to see clients and trips to conferences. So it's really important for us to be able to look at his work spending differently from all of our other spending. Because it's not really our money that we're spending in that case, it's his company's. We just get it back later. So YNAB changed this. And what that looks like now is, let's say Steven goes to a conference and he spends $100 on a hotel room for the night. We need to be able to see that separately from all of our other money. But now YNAB doesn't let us do that. YNAB actually subtracts that $100 from the amount of money we're allowed to live on next month. So let's say we had $10,000 next month, and this month Steven goes on a trip and spends $100. YNAB would say, well, too bad for you guys, now you only have $9,900 to live on next month. And that debt would go back to zero. So this just doesn't work for us. One, I no longer have the both of us no longer have a clear picture of how much he needs to be reimbursed. So dealing with the expense report is a huge pain. Number two, if we do want to keep using YNAB and having any kind of faith in our budget numbers versus how much money we really have, all of our confidence is totally shattered because we have to come up with all kinds of weird workarounds to separate his work spending. We have to change the dates that things were spent. It's like we introduce all this room for human error that we had previously gotten rid of when we switched to YNAB. And I know this is probably not the most fascinating topic, unless anyone here is a CFO for their company or really enjoys managing their own books, but I don't know a lot of people who love that part. But the point of me going into these deep details is to emphasize that this is really stressful for us. Every month, we're looking at our bank account and we're like, can we spend all the money in here? How long are we, what of this is actually available versus how much are you gonna get back from your company? And it's awful. And stress is a really powerful emotion, and it's an emotion that pushes people to go shopping for a new product. So I am in shopping mode for a new budgeting software right now. And Jesse, by the way, if you end up watching this video, I don't think you're here, I haven't run into you. I love your company, and I don't say this to trash YNAB as a product, but this certain feature change is really bringing me down. And so I'm shopping, right? I'm looking for something that is different than the solution I have right now. And here's YNAB's homepage. You can see it says gain total control of your money, which is not inherently a bad headline. It's a little bit generic. But again, I'm looking for something different, right? Here's what I get when I start Googling. Are you ready to take control of your finances? Well, no, I have pretty good control of my finances. The problem is that the software I'm using, it's forcing me into a system that doesn't work for my life. So is this gonna be any different? I don't really know. I can't tell from reading this page. Okay, so I'm gonna keep Googling, keep looking around. Take control of your finances. What the hell? Remember, I'm looking for a solution that is going to solve a pain that I'm feeling with a different solution. And nothing out there is proving that it's not just another zebra. All of these sound the same. And this is probably happening to you if you do a Google search for your competitors and you see what's on your website and you see what's on theirs and you're like, oh shit, we could probably swap these and no one would notice. That's what could absolutely happen here. Now the good news is that you can figure out what those deep nitty-gritty pain points are. You can find out all of those details of how they're using your product, just like I went into the details of how I'm using YNAB, and I'll show you that. But before I can do that, we need to talk really quickly about a behavioral theory that I love and use a lot in my work called jobs to be done. So jobs to be done started as a product development theory, and I'm curious, who here is already familiar with this? Okay, great. Actually, lots of people, which is really exciting. So if you are new to the theory, I'll kind of break this down a little bit. Jobs to be done, the theory goes basically that people buy and use your product because they want to make their own life better, right? Not because they care about your product. They probably don't care about your features. But we'll unpack that a little bit. And I realize now I haven't credited the original person who said this. Alan Clement wrote a book called When Coffee and Kale Compete. It's a major deep dive on jobs to be done. It's a great book. But we'll look at this in a little bit more of a visual detail. So let's pretend I'm your prospect, right? I'm just going along and my life is normal and I'm not really shopping for anything, but then something happens. There's an event occurring, or I find myself in a situation and that triggers a struggle. And for me, that was YNAB's update. That was the situation, that was the event. So if I eventually feel that so much pain associated with that struggle that I start to seek new solutions. And in a perfect world, I find your product and the struggle is resolved, right? Everything is better and I can move on and my life has improved because that struggle is no longer a part of it. So there's a handy little framework called a job story to better define your users' struggles and what they're looking for. And the job story goes like this. When blank is happening, that's whatever that event is that's causing them to struggle, help me do something. That middle part is how your product helps people, so I can blank. And the last part, the so I can, is how they envision their life being better with your product in it. So if we want to bring it back to those little stick figures, this is kind of how that would play out. So again, with YNAB's feature update, a very specific struggle was introduced into my life. And so here's how I would write my own job story as a user of some other finance app at some point. When my partner, and this is very specific, if you do customer research, you'll start to find lots of specific ones, but you'll find overall themes. So they don't have to get this deep, but mine is because it's my own. When my partner has made work-related purchases, and I need to track those separately from our other spending, give me the flexibility. I want flexibility, right? I want this to work for me, to separate those purchases from the rest of our spending. So I can plan next month's budget without all of this stress that I'm screwing up our numbers, right? I need some confidence that when I look at our budget, I really do know, oh, okay, God, good. We have a ton of money left. We're in the black. That's really not reflected on any competing software homepages in how they position their product versus anything else. And I guess a little bit of a caveat would be that people tend to keep their homepages general, and there's good reason for that. And I'm happy to talk about the difference between your homepage copy versus copy on a targeted landing page. But the point is that these all sound like what I'm already using, and so were I to go to a Capterra, or what I did, which is Google Best Finance Apps 2018, and get a bunch of listicle posts and click on 85 links and try to figure out, okay, which of these is going to be best for me, and are these all going to be the same? This is what I'm seeing, right? So I'm not any closer to trying out your product because it doesn't sound any different than what's out there. And by the way, I also understand that I'm maybe using the product incorrectly. Maybe I'm an edge case, right? Maybe YNAB has made a very calculated decision to serve customers who can use the software in a way that I just can't. I understand that, right? I know that's just a part of feature development. But I don't really think I'm an edge case, because when I search for YNAB alternatives, what comes up first is no one's AdWord campaign. What comes up first is no organic result of a competing customer's website. What comes up is a Reddit thread about YNAB alternatives. So YNAB has a very engaged community of users on Reddit. There's actually a whole subreddit dedicated to YNAB usage. And what people are saying on this subreddit is really interesting. So look at this. There are 295 upvotes on this post about YNAB alternatives. Now, I understand that the original poster wasn't saying, I'm mad and I'm leaving, but look how many people were struggling and looking for something different and got value from this poster who shared alternatives, 300 people. And those are just the ones who use Reddit and were able to sign in and upvote. How many more people are getting value out of this, like me, people who are getting there, and I'm not going to take the time to upvote, but this is really valuable to me. This next person does indicate that they are trying to make a switch. And look at the language they use to describe this, right? My finance is a bit of a mess because I can't grasp this new software. When they did the update, the new version didn't work for them anymore. This person is also looking for alternatives. I like that they titled theirs Rant. That's fair. When I get mad about software, I go on rants too. Now, the first complaint they have, I disagree with. They're mad that they had to switch from a one-time purchase to a SaaS model, and I think we all here understand the benefit of that from the business perspective. But I think the vocabulary of the next complaint is really interesting. The new features sometimes interfere with my usage of the product. That's what's happening to me too, right? So there's people out there who are struggling with this, and if you're a YNAB competitor, you should be reading this stuff. So this poster is my favorite because they list the exact reasons that YNAB's not working for them anymore. And my favorite is they feel like they're accidentally stealing from their future, right? Which is what was happening to us as well. If Steven spent $100 on a hotel room for a work conference, and we needed to keep that separate, YNAB would say, no, that is now coming out of your future budget. Sorry. So if you were a YNAB competitor, right? And you noticed, you did some research and you were like, oh, people are not happy with this. I wonder if we could leverage this in some way. Think how effective it would be if you could just take these words and use these to describe the pain that people might be feeling on a targeted landing page, maybe on your home page. How effective would that be? A colleague and good friend of mine actually worked with a YNAB competitor last year to test new positioning on their homepage. They started with something that was really similar to all those examples we just looked at, right? So this is, once again, we're talking about taking control of finances, which is true. That is what this thing does, but it, once again, just sounds like every other option. So this is what they tested. And they did this after running some customer research, and I'll show you that process in a minute. But they looked at the customer research. They looked at what this competitor's best customers said about the product. And customers were saying, this is so great, I can customize it so it works for me, it's flexible, and they used that in their new positioning. And that resulted in a 200% increase from people who visited the homepage and instead of bouncing, went through to the pricing page. Now, the conversation of conversions from this homepage all the way through to trial sign-up, I don't think it's fair for me to get into because I'm not telling my own client story. So I'm gonna keep this focused only on conversions from this page to another page. But the point is that this is really powerful stuff, right? 200% increase in people who stay on your website to learn more about your product and see if it might be a good fit. Think how many more people could be on your website and staying and looking at your pricing page if they could understand a little bit more about how your product is different from the other ones that are out there. Which brings us back to the customer research topic. So this is not the first time today that everyone has been told that they need to be talking to their customers. And I'm sure a lot of us do talk to our customers, whether it's on demos or in support, whatever it may be. But I want to talk about finding the job, again, that your product is doing for your people. I recommend that you do that using customer surveys and customer interviews. And the reason for that is customer surveys are great for getting a high volume of qualitative data. So you can identify a bunch of your most high-value customers, send a survey, and get dozens and dozens of responses. And those are great. But they don't give a lot of detail because people are busy and they're not going to write paragraphs and paragraphs about their story and their usage. And that's where the customer interviews come in. If you can get a handful of your customers on the phone and kind of learn about what was going on that led them to seek your product out and how they're using it now, those customer interviews will color in a lot of the gaps that are left by the surveys. They'll give you a ton of really interesting context. So I'm going to show you, again, we're going to get tactical right now, and I'm going to show you kind of what this looks like when I do it. But you can also use all of the tools that I use. UserList is the product I'm working on, and at this link you can download pretty much everything. It'd be a checklist of the process, the survey and interview templates, copy of the slides, pretty much anything related to this talk will be at this link. So as I mentioned earlier, this is most effective when you have a decent customer base that you can pull from. And that's why I would say it's okay in the early days of your company if your product positioning is kind of vague, it's kind of meh. You just don't have enough customer data to learn from yet. And that's the phase that I'm at with user lists. I just don't have the data. And so it's going to be a process of learning from people as they come on board. So if your company is young and you don't have enough people to pull data from, like, you get a pass, it's fine. So given that we're at growth, I'm going to assume over the next couple slides that you do have enough people to work with. And this is how I would suggest you go about doing this. So for customer surveys, pick a survey platform. I really like Typeform, specifically because I find they make it super easy to include a hidden field, where if someone takes the survey, I can track their email as well. And then I can go look them up in my marketing automation tool or my CRM, and I can learn more about who they were. So I like Typeform, but you can use Google Forms or Jotform or whatever you like. You're going to keep that survey very short. The one that I have at that link is only 5 questions long because people are busy. And the more questions you pile into a survey, the less likely they're going to take time to give you high-quality answers. So keep them super short. Identify 100 to 200 of your highest value customers. And high-value customers, of course, are going to look different in every business, right? But when I'm working with clients on this, what I like to look for is the people who are most engaged, whatever engagement means for your product, and who are also on some of the highest tiered plans. So you're going to email these people with a link to the survey. It's going to be super friendly. It's going to be very short. And I would, if at all possible, try to send it from a real person and not from a marketing automation platform that looks like it was sent by a marketing automation platform. Because I've found people are more likely to answer this email when it looks like it came from my own Gmail. And then let the results roll in. You want to aim for at least 25 to 50 results or replies minimum, just so you have enough data to work with and you can kind of look for trends. You do want to hold back about 40 of these customers because you're going to reach out to those folks for interviews, and you don't want to exhaust people with multiple asks in a short amount of time. So while your survey results are rolling in, you're going to email those remaining 40 customers and say, hey, I'd love to learn more about you and how you started using the product and what's working well and what's not. Could we get on a short call, just 30 minutes? No tricks. It's not high pressure. I just want to learn from you. People are surprisingly willing to do this. A number of founders I've spoken to are like, I don't want to annoy my customers, but people love talking about themselves. I'm not kidding. People love getting on this call. I usually see, and it's varied, of course, but on an average, a 20 to 25% yes rate to people saying, yeah, I'll book a time. And of course, people don't always show up because they get busy or they forget that the meeting was scheduled, whatever. But if you can get 10 customer interviews out of this project, then I would say you have enough customer data to work with. So in those interviews, when you're running the calls, you don't want to be looking for feedback on your product. You don't want to be asking, oh, what do you think of this? Or, hey, we were thinking of this feature. Would you ever use that? People are very bad at answering those questions because they'll put their opinions in there, but you're not looking for opinions right now. Really what you're looking for is the storyline of how they made decisions in the past. So the questions, once again, they're all downloadable, so you don't have to worry about coming up with a bunch of questions, but the questions are very what-focused. It's much more about, hey, so what did your life look like before our product, right? What were you using? What would, like, paint me a picture. What did your life look like? And then what happened that led you to start seeking something like our product? And what did you do to start finding solutions? And once you found us, what happened that made you sign up for a trial? And so on and so forth. A lot of what, all the way through that journey that they took, is what you're looking for here. You would definitely want to record these calls. Don't try to take notes, because having the raw language straight from your customers' mouths is amazing for copy and developing stronger positioning. Because eventually what you're going to be able to do is mirror your customer's language back to them within your marketing. So be sure to record these calls and then upload them. I'm a walking billboard for Rev.com. Upload them to Rev, which will transcribe all of your audio It usually takes 24 hours or less. Sometimes it happens within like 2 hours, and it's only, I think they do like $1 a minute, so it's so worth it. So what you're gonna end up with is a ton of qualitative data. You will have a lot of words that you're looking at, both in a spreadsheet where all of your survey results rolled in, and in all these transcripts, which will be pages and pages long. So the next step is to start finding the trends and figuring out what were those most common previous lives? What do they look like, right? What are our highest value customers doing before they ever feel a struggle? And then what causes that struggle, right? Because if you can speak to whatever's causing that struggle and what that struggle is, they're gonna be like, oh, these people get me. These people are actually gonna solve the problem I'm having. And so on and so forth, and I'm not gonna lead you through the stick person journey, but literally the questions that I use are designed to answer that when blank, help me blank, so I can blank job story framework. So as survey results roll in, you'll be able to see column by column what the most common situations were. And again, your interviews are going to provide a lot of really deep context. And I'll try to hurry this up because I know we're like very in the weeds here. But these are the activities that will get you closer to that really specific positioning. Now at this point, as I mentioned, you'll have a ton of data. You'll be like, what do I do with all these words? There's a document that I use that I call a voice of customer document. Every good copywriter, if you ever work with a copywriter, they'll talk about voice of customer. I know the copywriters in this room use this term, but I like using this document to kind of categorize the patterns that I'm seeing and make it really easy to refer back to the stickiest things that my customers say when I'm on the phone with them. So all of this is in that download link that I shared. But what's great about having this voice of customer doc where you've assembled and organized all your data is that you don't have to make up positioning off the top of your head, right? You can look at what do people really love about us? What have they said they love about us versus whatever else is out there? That's what we'll use. We'll just use our customers' words. That's what led to that 200% increase in views to the pricing page, right? So I'm gonna wrap this up because I wanna save time for questions, and looking at the timer, I've gone a little bit over. But once again, if you would like to access all of those resources, you can do so at this link. And I'm gonna be around not only today, but also tomorrow. So I love talking about this stuff, and I'm happy to chat further. So thank you very much. We can go to questions.
All right, we have time for questions.
So to your example about the YNAB, I feel like to change the messaging to focus on you specifically is it's like a super vertical right there.
Totally.
I think for my company, I do have one of those more generic wording there because I'm trying to capture over like 90 different verticals. So would you recommend just choosing a couple high value verticals or creating tons of different landing pages? Because I feel like moving away from generic will start making, isolating some of the people that are coming to my company's website.
That's a really valid concern, and it's the reason that a lot of people stay fairly generic on their homepage. I like to think of your homepage as an airport. Like there's a million people coming there, and they've all got different places they need to go, right? Some of them want to look at your pricing, some of them want to look at your jobs, some of them want to figure out where the contact info is because they're already using your product and they're mad and they want contact support. So I get the concern of being too specific on your homepage. In a scenario like that where you have a lot of different types of users, leveraging different landing pages for those users is a great move. So whether you're running ads to those and you've got a number of different marketing campaigns going, or whether on your homepage you have an option for people to immediately kind of segment themselves. The best example I can think of that is Buffer. So I don't know what their website looks like right now. I haven't gone there in a while, but I talked with their director of marketing about a year ago, and he was saying, we're really struggling to speak to both agencies and individuals on our homepage. What do we do? And they eventually made the decision to have a little, they made their homepage look like, here's the value proposition, here's a little subhead, and then below that, it looked like two browser tabs next to each other, and you selected, I'm an agency owner, or I'm a business owner. And then everything below that spoke specifically to you. So if you can come up with a way to kind of have people self-select on their homepage what they might be, then you can speak to those people much more strongly. And if you've got a ton of people, a lot of companies like to do this using a customers tab, a customers option in the header, and then using some kind of drop down, and you can choose I'm in sales, or I'm an HR person, or whatever your verticals may be. So really, I think your best bet if in that scenario would be to get people off of your homepage and to somewhere more specific to them as quickly as you can. Yeah?
Hi, Claire. Thanks for the talk. Can you go in a little more detail about choosing those 200 or so high-value customers? Do you recommend that you let them settle into your product a little bit, or if a high-value customer signs up for a trial, do you try and hit them, 15 days, or right after they've sort of just converted?
That's a very, very good question. Personal preference, I like to go with people who've been in the product for a while. And in the product for a while is obviously going to be different depending on how long it took them to onboard and activate and become a good user. For the most part, as I've done this work, I've largely worked with companies who have a transactional price point all the way up to a very enterprise price point. Uh-oh, did I mess something up? Okay, sorry, screen looked different. Anyway, so I would aim for the people who've been in the product for a while. My rule of thumb is 6 months, but that could of course be different depending on what getting on board looks like for your customers. But they're going to have the best information on how life is better now, because they'll now be just kind of living with your product. There's really good research to be conducted with those newer people, but to just keep things easy on yourself, I'd aim for the ones who've been in there for a while.
Any other questions? Thank
Looks
you very
good.
much, Claire. Yeah.
All right. Thanks everyone.